G'day, here's my talk introducing Ripple Pay. My name is Miles Thompson, and I'm on this mailing list, Ripple, where recently Romaldo here said, let's unstick the project and create a presentation. So I thought I would rip some of the slides out of my existing presentation, What is Money, and see if I could use them just to give a real quick intro to Ripple Pay. So my talk, Understanding Money, really comes in three parts, but I'm going to rip a bunch of stuff out of those different sections. So let's start with one-sided money. It's motivated by the question, who needs money anyway? Teachers could teach, farmers could grow food, everybody could do stuff, everybody would be happy. We don't really need money to make it happen. However, we know it doesn't work in practice. There's this question, who's going to go first? It's like, why would I help you if I don't know I'm going to get held back? And let's see how the picture changes when you introduce money into the picture. We're going to just give it to Joe. Joe's a lucky person. It's like a catalyst. You see, because now Joe's got some money. He can exchange it with his friend Bob, and Bob can then exchange it with Alice, and then Alice can use that money to buy something from Joe. Notice that you can't actually eat the money. The money hasn't actually provided any good to anybody. All it's done is kind of kicked off this process of trade. So that's enough about what is money for now. In the longer talk, I go a lot on about history of commodity money, but we can skip that for now. Let's jump to two-sided money or debt-based money. That's the kind of money we have today. So let's go from IOUs to banks. Now, we want to try and unstick this process without using any gold. So what Joe here could do is he could just write an IOU on a piece of paper. He could say, hey, I will give you $10. Well, not $10. He'd say, I will give you 10 hours of my time if you give me this IOU, right? And then he can use that to buy something from Alice. Alice can then use that to buy something from Bob. Bob can present the IOU back to Joe, get his 10 hours, Joe gets the IOU, he rips it up. Everybody's happy. Yay. Why is it not that simple? Because some people don't trust Joe. They might trust him, but they might think he doesn't know what he's doing. I don't want 10 hours of Joe's time. So let's try and represent that on the diagram here by saying these green lines here, which are lines of credit, and then the orange lines are the actual debt. Somebody's received something and they owe something back. So it's pretty predictable what's going to happen. His IOU goes to Alice, and then it goes to Bob here, but Grump's here. He in the corner, he's not willing to accept Joe's IOU. He doesn't know Joe. And so the whole system is stuck. It didn't work. So let's introduce the big sister. Now, she's like the head woman of the village. Everybody trusts her, and they know she'll find a way to make good on her debt. Not only that, but she also knows Joe, and she's willing to trust Joe. So she is willing to do this little operation here. What they just did was they swapped IOUs, and everybody's willing to accept that. So the trade goes around, same as before, and then Joe takes the IOU he got back, and he exchanges it back with his sister. They both rip it up. Everybody's happy. Note that she didn't actually do anything. All she had to do was be an arbiter of trust. She had to know that Joe was going to be good for it and create that process of trust. And that's actually what banks do. Well, now I know banks, they're a lot more complicated than that. Especially today, we've got central banking, we've got interest, we've got fiat money. But if you go back to the really old-fashioned banks, an IOU from the banks in the old days would actually say, this piece of paper will be good for 5 pounds of sterling silver from our vaults. And that's what the actual money used to say on it. So when the bank gives it an IOU like that, it's really almost like a dollar note. It's the precursor to our current dollar notes. And what just happened there is the bank lent money to Joe. They said, Joe, we think you're good for it. We're going to lend you $1, and in return we'll get your IOU. I promise to make good on this IOU that I've given you. So now he is good for it. So he then uses that to buy some goods, and then the money goes around in a circle, and finally it comes back to Joe. He makes something in return. He gets back the dollar. He presents it back to the bank. They both rip up their actual debts. Everybody's happy. That's how banking actually works today. That's where our money comes from. That's how it is invented, as debt. Now, again, there's this question of interest, exponential growth, there's central banking, fiat banking. We're not going to get into that. All that's slipped out for now. We're concentrating on a path to understanding what Ripple is. But in the area of debt-based money, there is this interesting idea. Somebody Well, Michael Linton in 1982, he noticed that money goes around in loops. All these scenarios, the money has to go around in a loop. And he kind of got this concept of the power of zero. And he introduced a concept called local exchange trading in Canada. And we have that today. It's called green dollars or time banking, a lot of other systems. It's really, what it is it's replacing the big sister with the community as a whole. What we do is we say, we're going to draw a circle around the people within this local community, and we're going to say, they trust everybody in the community, and everybody in the community trusts the community as a whole to make good. And that enables this to take place. Basically, Joe here, he kicks it off. He says, I'm going to go into debt a little bit. I'm going to go, -1 balance, and in return, I'm going to get some goods from Alice. Alice then takes her +1 credit, and she buys something from Bob, who then buys something from Joe. Joe's made good on his debt. Everybody's happy. It's all balanced out. Notice during this whole operation, the total was always 0. That total never changed from 0. That's why it's called the power of 0. That's local exchange trading. Let's move on to network money. This is Ripple money. I think the key observation that motivates Ripple is understanding that it's those lines of credit, those green lines, that are really the kind of underpinning behind money. In the gold-based situation, there is no trust. You know that gold is valuable because it has value in the market. You just kind of know that people want it. With our current debt-based money, the banks act as like an arbiter of trust. They are willing to trust you. You're willing to or forced to trust the government trusts the banks. There's kind of this process of trust in circles. And then we have local exchange trading, which is a community of trust. Now, only a few years ago, Ryan Fugger introduced this great concept, which is the network of trust. This is the Ripple Pay-based system. Let's have a look at how Ripple Pay-based systems would work. I think we've got enough intro now to understand how it works. Let's say that before you start doing Ripple, you need to establish a network of trust. Now, that's actually the hard bit. That's actually quite difficult to do in a practical sense. But let's just say everybody's gone in there and they've entered in the system. I'm willing to lend Bob $10. I'm willing to lend Alice $50, That makes this possible. So Bob goes down to the market and he sees that Joe has a box of records, and Joe's very generous. He's going to sell those records for $10. Bob doesn't have $10 right now, but what he does have is he has the Ripple Pay system. He looks into the system and he sees that whilst he doesn't know Joe and Joe doesn't know him, there's a line of trust through Alice. So he enters in this transaction to say, hey, Bob, you give me your records and I'll give you a debt. The debt goes from Bob to Alice and then from Alice to Joe. So now what happens is later on Bob settles up with Alice and Alice settles up with Joe. They don't have to take place one after the other. They don't have to take place at the same time. Those settlements can take place at any time. But basically later on those debts get settled. And as a result, the transaction could take place on the day at the market. Really, it's just a way of establishing lines of debt. But that's what Ripple Pay does. But now watch this. Now this is really cool. Let's say we have this network of trust. And let's say that Bob goes to the market and he buys those records from Joe. But then before he settles with Alice, Joe buys something from somebody over here, and then Bob makes good by buying, and then she buys something from Bob. Now we have a circle. Do you see that? We've got a circle of debts. Hey, nobody owes anybody anything. We can just cross off all those debts. And that's the magic. That's when it's really cool. That's when I think, it's really acting as a form of money. Because we can cross those debts off. We don't need to resort back to the cash-based system. But Ripple does both. It's a bit more flexible. Everybody's happy.